Hi, I'm Leanne Potter. I direct the Office of Learning and Innovation at the Library of Congress, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the 2020 National Book Festival. It is also my pleasure to serve as moderator of this special conversation entitled Parenting for Success, and to welcome our two authors, Judith Warner and Esther Wojcicki. Judith Warner is a writer, reporter, mother, and the author of a new book entitled "And Then They Stopped Talking to Me: Making Sense of Middle School." She wrote the 2005 New York Times bestseller, Perfect Madness: Motherhood in the Age of Anxiety, and the New York Times column, Domestic Disturbances. She is currently a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and recently completed a journalism fellowship for the Women Donors Network's Reflective Democracy campaign. Her last book, We've Got Issues: Children and Parents in the Age of Medication, received numerous awards from mental health professional and advocacy groups. Welcome, Judith.
Thanks for having me here.
And Esther. Esther Wojcicki, Woj as her students call her, is an educator, journalist, mother of 3 daughters, 2 who are Silicon Valley CEOs, and 1 who is a doctor, is also the author of the book entitled How to Raise Successful People: Simple Lessons for Radical Results. She is the founder of the Media Arts program at Palo Alto High School, where she built one of the largest high school journalism programs in the nation. She serves as vice chair of Creative Commons. She has previously worked as a professional journalist for multiple publications and blogs regularly for the Huffington Post. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to this exciting conversation.
Yes, I'm excited. So I have read both of your books, and I have to say, as I was reading them, I felt as if they were conversing with each other. So I was really, I think, our colleagues at the library who put the two of you together for this conversation really made a great choice. This is going to be fun. So let's get to it. The theme of our conversation today is parenting for success. And I'd like to start by asking each of you how you define success. And I'm sort of asking this in the context of, so if all parents really were successful, what would our children be like? And would we have to wait until they become adults to know whether we've been successful or not? So Judith, why don't we start with you? How do you define success?
You know, it's funny, in thinking about this conversation beforehand, I realized that the words success and successful are almost trigger words for me. I've thought of them as negative things for such a long time in the context of parenting. I mean, all of my books pretty much have been about the problems that parents cause for themselves, for their kids, for others in the community when they are overly concerned with success. But then I thought, all parents, including me, want their kids to succeed. And it's actually part of what we have to do, you know, as parents, is prepare them to succeed so they can leave the nest and go out and have lives. So I got to thinking, you know, I think that where I have a problem is when the focus is success defined by externals. And there are other ways of thinking about success that we care about a lot. And I was reminded of when I first became a mother. Literally, when my daughters were born, I was kind of obsessed with the idea that I wanted desperately for them to know that they were loved and valued for themselves, for who they were uniquely, and not for what they accomplished. That was just super important to me. And then as the years went by, and I tried to do that, I started to worry about whether I had actually done them an enormous disservice, because, you know, you get to middle school age, and being authentically yourself is a liability, right? Mm-hmm. And then even more so, second semester, junior year, you know, with college on the horizon and the preparations that you need, the stuff that you need in order to get in. I found myself one day saying to my older daughter, you got to get some leadership stuff on your application. You got to get involved in a camp, in a school activity or club or something, and you've got to get some leadership skills because they really want that. And she looked at me and she said, that flies in the face of everything you've ever said my entire life and all the values you've passed on to me. So I was, so I sort of stepped back and I had to rethink that. And then I just went back to her and said, the important thing is being the best you that you can be. And of course, conveying that well on paper when it comes to a college education. And I think that really is the crux of what I think success is for anybody, for a parent. What we want to do for our kids is really enabling them to be their best selves. And part of that means also being attuned to and trying to mitigate the things that stand in their way, especially things that are internal, like mental health issues, ADHD, that kind of thing. Really trying to help them find a way to develop strategies to get through whatever impediments they find.
That's good. I have a feeling that when your daughter said that to you, there was a part of you that felt very successful.
Actually, no, not in the moment. As I was feeling it now, I thought, oh, that sounds pretty good. But in the moment, no.
Not so much. Esther, how about you? What does success look like?
So I have a somewhat short answer to this, and it's probably because I've been thinking about it for a while. And success means, for me, or for my children, or for my students, means that you feel empowered to follow your dreams, that you have the people in your life that support you to become whatever it is you want to become and whatever it is you want to do. And that is success, because some kids, their parents want them to be doctors or engineers, and they want to be airline pilots, or they want to be artists. And this definition of success actually came about when I was discussing it with my former student who wrote the introduction to my first book called, it's education, it's blended learning. It's like moonshots in education, launching blended learning in the classroom. That's the first book. And it was James Franco. He's an actor. And he said to me that what was the most important part of what I did is that I believed in him. And so he believed in his dreams. And I think that makes a big difference. Of course, in the second half of the 12th grade, he decided he wanted to be an actor. And prior to that, he wanted to be a mathematician. So you can imagine how excited his parents might have been by his choice of what he really wanted to do. But I'm telling you, he's a born actor, as you can see, and he's done really well. So he helped me with finding that definition. So I appreciate that too.
No, that's great. That's really good. I like that you identify that. I like the way you said surrounding themselves with people who help. It's great.
Right.
All right.
That's the key.
Yeah.
If you have naysayers around you or people that are always making you doubt yourself, then, you feel pretty bad, actually. And it's impossible to have any grit and to accomplish your dreams.
No, well put. So something tells me that the thinking that the two of you have done around success may have certainly influenced your decisions to write your books. So I'm curious, what else motivated you to write? How about Esther? Why don't you start this one? What motivated you to write your book?
Well, the main thing that motivated me was that I was getting nonstop questions from people like, what did you do to your daughters? What did you feed them for breakfast? What was going on? How did that happen? So I thought, oh, well, I don't know. Let me think about what I did. And then that was followed up by the parents. It's like, why is your program so popular? What are you doing? I started with 19 kids in 1984. And by the time I wrote the book, I had over 700 kids taking this program. and six other journalism teachers. So I was trying to figure out what I had done, because sometimes, when you do things, you aren't aware of what you're doing. It's subconscious. So I agonized and talked to people and tried to figure it out. And so I decided I'm going to write a book. And then the main thing I'm going to do when they ask that question, I can just hand them the book. That'll take care of everything.
I love it.
But it turns out they wanted even more than the book. They wanted continued information. That's why I wrote the book.
That's great. Well, and it's probably fun to hand someone a book and say, okay, you need chapter 6. You need chapter 7. That's great. That's great. Judith, how about you? What motivated you?
I think that my last 3 books were all motivated by the same thing, which is being in a situation that doesn't feel right to me, that just seems sort of off and not good, and wondering why everybody else around me kind of takes it for granted and either thinks it's okay or thinks that it's just the way things have to be, and aren't questioning it. And wondering then, well, does it have to be this way? Has it always been this way? Is it this way everywhere? And is there actually something we can do about it to make it better for everyone? And in the case of, the current book on the middle school phase of life, there was this global sort of feeling, as the parents around me and I, as our cohort just moved into 6th grade, 7th grade, that this was going to suck. This was just going to be terrible. It was going to be the worst years of our kids' lives, and they were going to be super mean, and there was nothing we could do. And I just thought, well, wait, why? I mean, why does it have to actually be? And I couldn't just ask questions. There were other phases in being a parent where I really could ask people basic questions about that and have a conversation about it. But it was a moment when people were kind of locked into their own thing, their own unhappiness. And it was hard to really have those conversations. And I found it hard to be a parent of a kid that age. Really less because of what they were like, but because of the general atmosphere, the general feeling surrounding everything. And I couldn't find anything to read that answered my questions. So that led to the feeling of, well, if I'm going to put all this time into trying to figure it out, I may as well write a book about it and see if I can feel better and if other people can too.
I love that. That's such good advice for everybody. If you don't find a book that speaks to your need, write it yourself. I love it. I love it. So Judith, in your book, I'm gonna quote you for a minute. In your book, you mentioned an aha moment that you had when your daughters entered 7th grade. You wrote, after all the reporting on how different, how scary, how foreign, how horrifying things were going to be once we had middle schoolers, I discovered that in a lot of very basic ways, middle schoolers were about the same as I'd remembered them. I quickly learned, however, that there was one really big thing that had indeed changed: the world of middle school parenthood. And that change was dramatically for the worse. Can you talk a bit about that? What did you notice about middle school parents?
Well, as with parents of kids of all ages now and for the past couple decades, they were super present and super enmeshed with their kids. And the problem was, though, that in the middle school phase, that enmeshment took a really toxic turn. I mean, it's, arguably never such a great thing, but especially then, it was just all wrong. It was, contrary to what the kids themselves needed and wanted in terms of their own ability to start to separate and become their own people. And it also meant that the parents were getting involved in, middle school drama, quote unquote, in ways that were really destructive, both for themselves and for the kids, because often, the kids have their drama. That happens at that age, but they move on, and especially they need to move on. And if they can't move on, they need to be taught to. But when the parents were witnessing everything and feeling everything along with their kids, they absolutely couldn't move on. And that made it much harder for everyone.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine as I read that, and reading Esther's book, I immediately thought, oh, wow. So, Esther, the subtitle of your book is Simple Lessons for Radical Results. And you offer 5 suggestions that might have been really helpful to the middle school parents that Judith encountered. So, can you tell us a little bit about your acronym TRICK? What's the trick that you have in mind?
So the trick is, it stands for trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. And so my kids also went through middle school, of course. All kids go through middle school. And one of the things you want to do is trust them. And not only that, they need to trust themselves and their own instincts, and they have to have a relationship with you that is built on trust so they can come home and talk to you about what's going on. And a lot of kids stop talking to their parents at that age because their parents, as Judith was saying, become so involved that they try to control their lives, the lives of the kids. And the kids, some of these suggestions are just not relevant, ridiculous. So they block the parent by not talking to them, not saying what's really going on. And so they're trapped between the parent, the kids, and their friends and the school. So trust is so important, and helping them believe in themselves, respecting their ideas. If they come up with some ideas that seem a little wacky, honestly, sometimes those ideas are the best ideas. Just because you don't like them doesn't mean they're not right. And then giving them independence. Middle school, it's actually the preparation for what's coming in high school and teenage years. The number one drive in teenagers is independence. They want to be independent. And that is where the conflict comes, because the parents are like, you're not ready to drive. You're not ready to make those decisions on your own. You're not ready to do a lot of things. And so I say, this just doesn't work. It's best to give them some independence, to have open communication, to collaborate with them. That's the C part of it, and treat them with kindness. Kindness, oh my God. Most kids don't think that there's any kindness in school at all. The schools don't have any kindness. You just do a poll and you will see what they think. But the schools, the parents, all of us, kindness doesn't cost anything. And if we could just be kind to one another, and especially kind to your kids if they make a mistake, makes a huge difference. And that's what I did with my kids. And what was interesting to me is Susan said to me at one point, actually even recently, she said, one thing that was really unique about you, Mom, is that we never hid anything. There were no secrets. I think that's what it takes.
That's great. No, I think your trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness speaks to all of us. And I have to say, it sort of resonated as well with something that Judith had written about the importance of good relationships and a sense of belonging and feeling that you are competent and skilled. And I think that both of you sort of, like I said, your books speak to each other. Really fabulous. So Esther, chapter 7 of your book is entitled Children Hear What You Do, Not What You Say. And Judith, chapter 8 of your book is entitled What We Value. In both of these chapters, the two of you emphasize adults as role models. And you really focus on how both parents and other adults teach children by their own example. I'm curious about who your own role models were and what they taught you. Maybe Judith, you could start this one. Who were your role models and what did they teach you?
It's funny. I think that my role models were actually a number of my high school teachers. because they valued the life of the mind without qualification. And they had built lives around that were really good lives. And they respected people who were smart, and they did treat us with respect in the classroom. I mean, the sad thing is I've come to realize more recently that a lot of other people didn't actually feel that in the school where I was. And especially girls of color did not feel that. And it makes me very sad that I was blind to that at the time and unaware of that difference of experience. But nonetheless, at the time growing up, to me, they really were my role models, because they had developed this life that I dreamt of having, and they did it with real grace. And I'm not sure there always was enormous kindness, because it was a competitive environment and the two tend not to go together. But they certainly, they did it with grace, and I admired them greatly.
Your use of the word admiration, and that's great. Esther, how about you? Who were your role models?
Well, so I grew up in a situation, if you read my book, that I'm the child of immigrants from Russia, and they came over to America and they had their parenting technique defined by Russia and the way that they had grown up. And so in my case, it was a situation where I decided I didn't want to parent the way I had been parented. And so I made it on the conscious level. And I think that parents tend to subconsciously parent the way they were parented. That's what you do. It's just natural. And you teach the way you were taught. And so I had role models in some of my friends' parents, and I saw what they were doing with their kids. And I thought, that is what I want to do when I'm a parent. And so I copied their ideas, which were basically to no spanking, no hitting, no ridicule. It was just, you were to talk to your child, and if there were things that they didn't do, that you tried to work it out, but no hitting ever. And so I would say that my role model, I had a best friend. She was an only child, and her parents were my role models.
Did you ever tell them?
Yes, as adult. When they were adults, I did tell them. They were incredible. And she grew up with a lot of trust and respect. And she, became quite an amazing person. So I did tell them that. But, it's interesting. They didn't know it while I was growing up. It's just my parents always wanted to know why I always wanted to spend so much time at her house. Her parents were great.
Really neat. It's marvelous. I love that. Okay. So as a parent and as an educator myself, I have favorite parts of each of your books. Esther, very early in your book, you write that every child has a gift and is a gift, and that it is our responsibility as the adults in their lives to nurture those gifts. And Judith, you remind us that we have to see our children and other people's children as works in progress. I could not agree more with both of you. Beautifully said. I am curious, do you each have favorite parts of your own books or big takeaways that you'd like every reader to not only hear, but act upon? And Judith, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I guess my answers are not the same for the two parts of the question.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite part of the book is the chapter on being a middle schooler in the late 70s or early 80s, which I think it's basically being a Gen X middle schooler, although I'm the oldest Gen Xer. In the oldest Gen Xer year, not the oldest one on the planet. I just really enjoyed writing that chapter. I think it's fun to read. And I think that it says, I've been told, at least by other people who've read it and for whom it's their favorite chapter, that it really says a lot about how the past informs the present for us as parents, and especially as parents of middle schoolers. The most important takeaway for me, though, is, and it's just so heartfelt, is take care of yourself, and especially your own relationships, your own mental health. You know, be the best you that you can be. Same idea of success in the situation of parenting, because so much of what goes wrong happens because parents are in the grip of anxiety that they don't have a good handle on, or depression they don't have a good handle on. I mean, I can't tell you over the course of my reporting, whether for this book or for articles or for whatever else, this is what comes up. You know, the fact that there is a parent, and very often a dad, who is having these kinds of issues that are not being acknowledged or treated, and the whole household is suffering for it. You know, I think it plays out a little differently with moms because of the power dynamic, but very often, you know, these forces are acting upon us, and as a result, we behave in ways towards our kids that we regret. So I know that I get into that in the book, where I have people kind of try to turn the mirror on themselves rather than vilify their kids when they're middle schoolers, which is something we tend to do. And so I really think that, to me, is the most important and helpful takeaway.
Very good. And Esther, how about you? Do you have a favorite part or a big takeaway?
Well, so my favorite part of my book is chapter 8, which is kindness. Model it, it's contagious. And it doesn't cost anything for us to be kind to each other, especially now in this pandemic. You know, just smiling at people and saying hello and how are you, it makes such a big difference. And so that is probably my favorite part of the book, because I think it's relevant to everybody, no matter where you live, no matter what country, no matter what color your skin or your religion. As far as what I think is the most important part of the book, there are a lot of important parts, but this one is chapter 4. Don't do anything for your children that they can do for themselves. We pamper our kids so much that what happens is they are disempowered. The more you do for your child, the less capable they feel themselves. So if they know how to cook dinner, for example, they know how to make their beds, do their laundry, these things, it sounds kind of like, quote, work, but these are important skills for life. And there's a course at UC Berkeley that became a required course that was really popular called Adulting. They just instituted it like a year or two ago. And it was a course teaching kids how to do their laundry, how to cook, how to take care of themselves, how to do things that they were never asked to do because the parents did it all. We have an epidemic in this country. And so that's one of the most important parts of my book. Don't do anything for your children that they can do for themselves.
That's right. There's a lot to empowerment. It's very true. This has been fabulous, ladies. Thank you both so much. I wish you both the very best. And again, thanks so much for joining us in the National Book Festival.